Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. We're just gonna wait another maybe 30 to 45 seconds. All right. I know that there are people still coming in the room, but I want to honor our time together. And so, hello, thank you so much for being here. I want to welcome you to NCLR's annual end of the year briefing. My name's Imani Rupert Gordon, and I am the president of the National Center for LGBTQ Rights, and I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you all today. I'm joined for this virtual briefing by some of the incredible staff here at NCLR, who I'm going to introduce in just a few minutes. Over the next hour, we are going to give you an update on NCLR's work over this past year and maybe a peek into the start of 2026. We've also saved some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. I remember at one of our briefings last year, we talked about Project 2025 and how it would be important for all of us to pay attention to what some of our opponents are attempting to do. And still a good idea to keep an eye on that document because it's actually been very telling. And while that document definitely gave us insight into what this administration would look like, without a doubt, what has prepared us most for 2025 and the attacks on our community by this current administration is what we learned in the previous Trump administration. We learned very quickly, very, very quickly, that we have to challenge everything. This administration bombards us with attacks, and very often these attacks are illegal and unconstitutional, and it exhausts us. And discouragingly, exhaustion is a very big part of this strategy. They're trusting that we'll throw our hands in the air and just say, oh, I guess they're going to do this now. But we don't do that. We're using the same strategy that we learned during his last term, and that is that we are challenging everything. We don't cede any ground, and if someone is going to try to hurt our community, they're going to have to fight us for everything. If there's something for us to challenge, we're going to challenge it. If there's a way to stop or slow things down, that's what we're going to do, and that's what we've done. You see, challenging these keep our community safe for days, and those days can turn into weeks, they can turn into months, and that can turn into years. And as you hear from our team, you'll understand this is what we're doing, and it's helping to keep our community safer. At the end of 2024, our team was working overtime to prep for what we knew was coming. And so when the trans military ban executive order was announced, we announced our challenge immediately. In fact, NCLR, along with our partners at GLAD Law, challenged the first 4 anti-LGBTQ executive orders before any other group challenged one. And I want to be clear, all LGBTQ groups are doing their fair share. In fact, they are doing more than their fair share. I'm proud to be in movement with all of them. But what I am saying is that NCLR's leadership in this movement is undeniable. When it was time to show up first, NCLR did. We sent a strong message that we know what's happening and we won't be bullied into anything. NCLR proves over and over again that it's not the size of your organization, but the heart of your organization. And if that is the measurement, there's not a bigger one than NCLR. Our first challenge to that executive order that banned transgender service members, as you remember, we had done this before. We challenged this discriminatory ban during the first Trump administration. And so it was strategic for us to start right here. We were able to rely on existing relationships and our knowledge of this sector, so we were able to move swiftly and strategically. And our previous experience quickly turned into well-developed expertise. And so what started as a challenge to the military ban turned into more than that. We then challenged the illegal TRICARE exclusion, which would take away health coverage from the trans kids of service members, and then sued again when the military pensions were ripped away without cause from trans service members. So we've been very busy on the litigation front because that's not even all of it, and you're going to hear about some more of our litigation in just a few minutes. But the litigators weren't the only ones working overtime. NCLR has the oldest immigration and asylum program of any LGBTQ legal organization. And in 2024, we started prepping our clients to expedite their cases because we knew what would come down the pike. And Min's going to share more about that and what it means now that they've halted asylum interviews. And this year, we held two rural pride events, one in Florida and one in North Dakota. This program allows us to provide much needed resources and education to people in rural communities. But we learn how to best advocate and support LGBTQ people in these parts of the country because of this work. And we hear from the people that are directly experiencing the harm. These voices are often ignored, and this amazing program allows us to do better and be better for our community, and it has for a decade. We've done so much good work during a time when our community needs it most. And before I turn it over to the team, I also just want to mention the importance of being part of the LGBTQ movement, especially right now. Like I said before, NCLR is not doing this work alone. I've said this multiple times over the past few years, but when you look at civil rights history and look at the leaders and the organizations that made civil rights possible, they didn't always agree on the same strategy. And decades later, when we look back, we can't talk about civil rights without naming all of them together, even though they thought they were worlds apart. The LGBTQ movement is all in close communication, national, state orgs, grassroots organizations across the country. And NCLR plays a pivotal role in pulling these groups together so that even when we don't share the exact same strategy, we are absolutely working together. And so when people look back on LGBTQ civil rights at this time, they're going to see that we all played an important role because there were leaders that made sure that we were working together. That coordination role is often overlooked, but it's important, and NCLR is at all of these tables in these leadership roles. And so lastly, I just want to say, we communicate to you about the work because the work is what matters. And I know that many of you have read about the attacks on nonprofit organizations. I want you to know that we are paying close attention to this as well. I want you to know that over the past few years, we have fortified our infrastructure, strengthening our physical, digital, and cybersecurity. We've reviewed and strengthened policies and compliance across the organization. We've done this not in a response to attacks, but just because we are being a healthy organization. This type of work doesn't make the annual report, but I want you to know that we have been preparing this organization for sustainability, and we are in a strong position and ready for this moment. With that said, we are going to talk about the work now. Today, we are joined by some of NCLR's phenomenal staff. Shannon Minter, the VP of Legal, Amy Whalen, Senior Staff Attorney, Ming Wong, Director of Community Justice and Access, and the newest addition to our team, Lauren Gray, Vice President of Communication and Public Affairs. Some of you may remember Lauren. She led our comms from 2017 to 2019, and we are thrilled to have her back. And lastly, we are going to have some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So if you do have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A section, and someone on our team will either write the answer as it comes up or answer them out loud, or we can even get back to an answer if we don't have anything for you right now. So that said, let's get started. Shannon, we're going to start with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Amani. And yeah, hit us up with questions, y'all. And Amani, I just want to thank you for your leadership in this moment. We're so fortunate to have you leading NCLR, and I particularly want to thank you for your belief in collaboration and courage. I feel like those are just the hallmarks of your leadership and what we need right now so much. Anyway, as Amani noted, we are not giving up an inch of our rights or our progress, not an inch, people. I mean, we are not babes in the woods here. We are using every bit of NCLR's collective knowledge, skill, experience, expertise, we've accumulated all of that over the decades. We're bringing all of that to the table now. I mean, many of our staff, me and others, were here for the prior Trump administration, including actually Lauren, who is back now. So, I mean, we've been here before. We are only wiser, we're more seasoned, we're more ready this time around. Our strategy generally is to stop harmful policies where we can, to delay them where we can, to reduce harm where we can, and to build a foundation for the future. So Amani noted NCLR filed the first four cases challenging anti-LGBT Trump policies. I mean, we were able to do that just really quickly out of the gate. And we're now averaging a new case about every 2 months. And you all may wonder, like, how do we choose which cases to bring? Well, we choose cases that take advantage of our areas of expertise, cases that address serious harm, cases where we know that if we don't act, no one will, or no one will be able to act quickly enough. So, long story short, we take cases where there's deep harm and where we can have a significant impact. One of our greatest strengths of our legal program in particular is that we are incredibly lean. We are very nimble. We're able to respond to breaking events very quickly. And I might know this too. This year, that enabled us to file an immediate challenge to President Trump's transgender military ban. We filed that days after he announced it. You may know the military is the largest employer of transgender people in this country. It is a critical lifeline for many low-income individuals, people of color. We were able to leverage the deep expertise we gained from challenging that ban back in 2017, the first time Trump imposed it. This is a very complicated, highly technical area of law dealing with military structure and the lots of case law about military policies. But because we had already developed a lot of knowledge about that the first time around, we were able to quickly file a challenge and we got right out of the box one of the most powerful decisions I've ever seen in my entire career, finding that that ban was, quote, dripping with pretext and soaked in animus. And we know many of you are concerned about the composition of the current Supreme Court. You may know the Supreme Court actually stepped in and stayed that victory so that even though we were able to stop it for a while, the ban was able to go into effect. Look, we're concerned about the Supreme Court too. I will say, though, that we still very much believe in the power of the legal system, and we still have a lot of tools in our arsenal, and we can do a lot to throw sand into the gears and to slow down the harms that these policies are causing, and we're to stop many of them. And that we are very intent on that goal. But we've also been really pushed to dig deep and come up with creative legislative policy approaches that don't depend on the courts and with new ways to reach the public directly with the public key audiences in some very interesting new ways. And I'll just give you one example. We have come up with new legislative approaches to protect LGBTQ young people if the Supreme Court strikes down bans on conversion therapy in a case called Childs versus Salazar that I know many of you are following. As you know, this is one of NCLR's big issues. We've worked on this for more than 30 years. We were able to get about half the states to pass laws protecting young people from this practice. It is entirely possible that the Supreme Court is now going to strike those down. Well, if they do, we are ready. We have come up with an entirely new legislative approach to protect young people against that harm. We've been working with state groups and legislators across the country so they will be ready, if need be, to be right out of the gate to get those new laws in place if there's a negative decision in Childs. And then we are addressing this deadly, insidious practice right at the source. We're going straight to parents. We are working in this very interesting new way that you'll hear more about from Lauren to support conservative parents who have put their children into conversion therapy and they have seen firsthand the terrible harms that it caused, and helping those parents reach out directly to other conservative parents so that the world we want to create is one in which no parent would even dream of putting their child into conversion therapy. So, long story short, you all, we are not without resources and strategies to meet this movement. And despite how dark the current moment is, I am actually very optimistic that we are going to regain the ground we've lost and that we are building a foundation for even more protections and a more supportive world for young people in our community and for all of us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my amazing colleague, Amy Whalen. And she and I have worked together now for, I don't know, I think close to 20 years, but give it to you, Amy.
Thank you, Shannon. And um, I just want to reiterate that, of course, as Shannon said, these are very dark times for LGBTQ people and their families. But I am also really proud of lawyers in the legal movement right now, I have to say. I'm going to focus on three issues NCLR has focused on over the last several months. It's well known at this point that Trump has issued a series of executive orders targeting transgender people, threatening to go after parents who support their children, and attempting to bully states and medical providers to target transgender children and adults. NCLR knew these actions were coming and we were prepared. So, one of Trump's executive orders specifically attacked transgender women housed in federal prisons. It directed that any transgender woman housed in a women's facility be immediately transferred to a men's prison. And it mandated that the federal prisons immediately stop all medical treatment for gender dysphoria. So, combined, these provisions were intended to seriously endanger these women's lives. We knew, as everyone did, that if these women were moved to men's prisons, they would be immediately targeted for violence and assault. We also knew that by targeting an incredibly vulnerable population, Trump was hoping to gain early wins. He hoped no one would step in to help these women and it would lead to a quick victory. Instead, 6 days after that EO issued, we sued the Trump administration. And on that same day, we obtained our first emergency federal court order stopping the prison system from transferring those women and ordering the prisons to continue their medical care. Within 3 weeks after the executive order was issued, we had three separate cases on behalf of 20 of these women. And during that time, we prepared legal briefs and arguments, but we also gathered critical factual information from our clients about what was happening to them. And we quickly worked with experts to make sure that the judges understood how incredibly dangerous these prison directives were to the health and well-being of our clients. And because of these cases, these women are protected from these serious harms while we continue to litigate for permanent orders. So the government is appealing those orders, but they will remain in place during those appeals. So they are protecting them during the litigation. These cases are in line with NCLR's strategy of protecting the most marginalized people in our community. By focusing on prisoners, the administration was intentionally targeting people over whom they have almost complete control. And we could not let that happen or allow the administration to so blatantly put people at risk. Each time this administration tries to normalize this kind of extreme violence and harm, we must respond, as Imani, also said earlier. The second issue we were working on a few months later. So NCLR quickly mobilized to fight a different attack by the Trump administration that happened back in July. At that time, the Department of Justice sent more than 20 subpoenas to hospitals and medical providers around the country that treat transgender minors. The Department of Justice did not disclose which hospitals or providers received those subpoenas, but we quickly learned that the government was demanding access to the private healthcare records of children around the country. So, under the guise of investigating fraud, the administration was seeking the complete medical records containing not just privileged communications between patients and their providers and the parents of these children, but also things like billing documents, prescriptions, social security numbers, and even private information about family medical history that would be contained in these records more broadly. So the subpoenas are part of a broader attack by the Trump administration against transgender children, their parents, and their medical providers, with the ultimate goal that they have stated very expressly of ending all health care for transgender people. Since the subpoenas went out, more than a dozen hospitals across the United States have scaled back or ended healthcare programs for people under the age of 19, mostly in blue states. So NCLR quickly mobilized with other LGBTQ organizations to respond to these attacks and these subpoenas. Our group created a fact sheet for parents to notify them about the subpoenas and make sure that they are connected with legal organizations like NCLR. We quickly researched the rights of hospitals and providers related to the subpoenas, and we provided that information to hospitals around the country, including their duty to protect the confidential health information of their patients. We also helped organize and become part of a legal response to the subpoenas so that families can fight the disclosure of their private health information, even if their hospitals are not doing that. So we are part of a network of attorneys who have already filed motions in federal court to protect patient records and who are prepared to file more. Hospitals, thankfully, some of them are also fighting these subpoenas, and several courts have already ruled that the subpoenas are improper, that they were motivated by animus, and that they improperly seek information that has nothing to do with the laws the Department of Justice enforces. So as a result of this work, we are not aware of any hospitals who have disclosed this private information so far, and we are working hard to keep it that way. Finally, even before the Trump administration took office, NCLR noticed an extreme influx in online and in-person harassment and bullying of transgender children. There are now organizations in this country, including ones that host public websites, whose sole purpose is to post pictures and private information about transgender children with the hope that other people will target and harass them. These actions are deeply unsettling, especially to kids who otherwise have no online presence and certainly not any presence that would out them on the internet forever. So NCLR is working to address these issues through litigation, legislation, and other strategies. Many states have civil or criminal doxing and cyber harassment laws that cover this conduct, but many more of those laws are needed. It's also essential to make sure that state entities are enforcing these laws and that we bring private lawsuits against the most egregious harassers, which NCLR is also working on. So, this is coming from a place where this issue should be important to everyone, regardless of politics or personal beliefs. It's deeply alarming that adults are sitting behind their computers or attending sporting events with the sole purpose of trying to harm and target children and get other people to harm and target those kids. Every child deserves protection from these outrageous acts, but that is not going to happen until these harassers and bullies face real consequences. So I'm going to hand it over to Ming now to talk about some of our other work, but I just want to thank everybody for being here and for supporting us.
Thanks so much, Amy. Yeah, I just want to say one of the highlights of my professional life is getting to work with Amy and, of course, with Shannon, our whole incredible team. And thank you all who are joining us today for tuning in to hear more about our work. I'm going to share about three things today: our asylum and immigration work, our work with legal aid organizations, and our Rural Pride program. It gives me a lot of pleasure to get to share the work that our immigration project in particular is doing. I'm an immigrant myself, and it's quite an honor to get to do this work at a time when our immigrant communities are under attack. So OGAR, or HOME, is NCLR's immigration program, and we provide legal help to LGBTQ immigrants, primarily those fleeing violence and persecution in their home countries. And yeah, immigrants are under attack right now. This year, we've seen violent and terrifying ICE arrests and raids targeting workers, families with children, and even subjecting U.S. citizens and lawful green card holders to racial profiling and physical violence. What should be our immigration system should be an efficient civil process to decide and adjudicate immigration applications, but instead it is becoming a chaotic, increasingly cumbersome, and punitive system. Uh, as an example, last Tuesday, USCIS, which is the agency that's supposed to process asylum claims, announced that it was freezing decisions on all asylum cases. And in that same memo, announced that it might soon reopen or would soon reopen and review cases of already granted immigration benefits, including green cards. This is a shocking development, and it's very frightening to a lot of our clients. Many of our clients, even before this, had faced long delays in their processing of their cases, confusing information coming out of the administration and from USCIS, and faced a lot of uncertainty about their future and their safety. Almost all of our clients have experienced severe trauma and abuse. For our clients, this uncertainty and delay and the prospect of being returned to the harms that they faced, or worse, are unimaginably terrifying. So here at NCLR, in OGAR, we are giving our all to protect our clients and help them navigate the legal immigration system, to advocate for themselves and their lives, and to access resources and support from their communities. We really try to give them a holistic sense of support from our organization. So anticipating with this incoming administration, that we would be facing some confusing and harmful policy changes. Starting last year, we were working overtime to expedite the cases of many of our clients who've been waiting, as I said, years for their asylum claims to be heard. As Imani mentioned, we had to take extraordinary measures to try to expedite their cases, including filing claims in federal court simply to compel the asylum office to process our clients' applications. These are federal claims to compel, an agency to do its job, essentially. But thanks to those efforts, we were able to get many of our long-term clients asylum interviews and asylum grants before the current freeze. We've also hired some part-time contract attorneys in anticipation of needing more assistance for clients who are being placed in immigration court or removal proceedings, which are very resource and time intensive. And those contract attorneys are expanding our capacity to review and expedite those cases as well before further, probably negative developments. I'll just end the segment by saying we're all in this together. Immigrants are not isolated and should not be isolated in this country. We need everybody's support to continue advocating for all of our community members, working to challenge homophobic, transphobic, and anti-immigrant government actions. Speaking of support and solidarity, I want to turn now to our work with legal aid organizations. So as a little bit of background, legal aid organizations are organizations that provide free legal services to those who cannot afford an attorney in civil matters. So kind of the civil branch of what people might know, like public defenders, for example, provide free legal services to those who need criminal defense. So nationally, the largest funder of legal aid is the Legal Services Corporation, which was created by Congress in 1974, and they fund the free legal services across this country. And Legal Services Corporation, or LSC, has historically had very strong bipartisan support, almost unanimously getting funded every funding cycle. Legal aid, the reason for that is legal aid actually ends up saving local, state, and national governments money. It boosts local economies. Having a lawyer for a poor person can mean preventing homelessness, preventing developing serious health conditions. It protects survivors of domestic violence and trafficking. It gets parents and families support and resources so children don't get removed and placed into foster care. It ensures disaster relief funding gets to the most vulnerable in the community. So it really saves money and kind of ensures that the rule of law applies to all. Legal aid organizations have a mandate to serve all low-income people. To fulfill that mandate, many legal aid organizations provide staff with resources to understand the varied legal needs of people in their jurisdiction. So what's happening now, unfortunately, is people are trying to widen political divides or create political divides where there shouldn't be any. And so that means even legal aid is being subjected to politicization. And that's created a lot of uncertainty and fear among legal service providers who are just trying to do their job and serve low-income people in their communities. And they're worried that just trying to do so might threaten their funding or expose staff to threats and harassment. Um, so as a little bit more background, NCLR for years, we developed a curriculum for legal service providers, legal aid providers, to understand and better serve the legal needs of LGBTQ people in their communities. So we've used that curriculum to train attorneys and legal workers on the legal issues low-income LGBTQ clients face, as well as how to effectively communicate with LGBTQ clients, protect privacy, and so on. We've updated that curriculum and trained thousands of legal aid staff and pro bono attorneys over the past 15 years. But unfortunately, like I mentioned, there's this climate of uncertainty now about what legal aid organizations can do, what kinds of resources and training they can provide to their own staff. Responding to that, we're adapting how we deliver our curriculum and our training. So instead of, we've in the past partnered with legal aid organizations, they bring us in, we conduct the training for all their staff. But now what we're trying to do is organize general legal education events that are open to any attorney or any legal worker who wants to attend, partnering with local bar associations instead of legal aid organizations that are, bar associations are fully private, they're not funded by government money, and then making those trainings available to, whoever wants to attend, but with a focus on ensuring that the content is relevant to legal aid attorneys. We've also built a very strong relationship with the legal aid section of the American Bar Association. And so for a number of years, we've been helping plan their annual conference to also ensure that at that conference, there is useful and relevant content for those serving LGBTQ clients. We've also built a really great network of colleagues at legal aid organizations who kind of share with us updates because they're on the ground seeing what's happening for low-income LGBTQ clients in their communities, including in a lot of rural communities. And so that keeps us better informed about the developing legal needs of LGBTQ clients. And then we can share that information back out and share models for inclusive legal service provision that we learn about. So the underlying goal behind our legal aid work is we want to ensure every LGBTQ person, no matter their economic situation or where they live, can access competent legal representation when their rights are on the line. Which, speaking of people being able to access legal rights and legal protections wherever they are, I'll turn now to our Rural Pride program. So people may know rural areas in this country have been politically neglected and economically exploited for a long time. Many rural communities face high levels of poverty and mortality. LGBTQ people in rural areas often face barriers to accessing affirming services like healthcare and housing. And that's been exacerbated in recent times by cuts to our safety net and social services funding like Medicaid and Medicare. This is going to disproportionately affect rural communities where there's already a crisis, particularly around healthcare, and exacerbate barriers to accessing healthcare. Recognizing the great need to ensure that our national movements include the concerns relevant to rural communities, we started Rural Pride about a decade ago to connect our national movement with LGBTQ people and organizations in rural communities, and also to counter that narrative that rural communities don't have LGBTQ residents, or the myth that rural communities are somehow inherently hostile to LGBTQ people. As part of that project, we organize gatherings of community leaders, community members, advocacy organizations, healthcare providers, educators, folks in rural communities who work or live in rural communities to discuss the concerns of LGBTQ people in their communities. Most recently, I wanted to share we helped to plan and present at the North Dakota LGBTQIA 2S Plus Summit. Um, and one great success from that summit, this was the second year that they'd ever had a day specifically for professionals, and they doubled their registration from the previous year. Over 50 people came, and over 200 people came to the general summit, including from neighboring states. It's been such an honor and pleasure to work on that summit. It's grown so much over the years to become an incredible resource to North Dakota and now the region to neighboring, Minnesota and South Dakota. Residents will often come to that summit as well. And next year, because of the success of Professionals Day this year, we're going to work with them to create a specific legal track to offer to legal professionals and encourage more legal professionals to join as well. So yeah, our work to ensure the self-determination of rural communities and LGBTQ people and addressing the issues that concern them will remain a core part of our mission and a core part of why we do Rural Pride. With that, I do want to turn it over to Lauren, who I'm delighted to be working with again.
Thank you so much, Ming. I just want to start by saying how thrilling again it is to be at NCLR, especially under Amani's leadership, working with a team like Shannon, Amy, and Ming that I just have so much love for. So it's really amazing to be back. I joined NCLR last month after spending the better part of this year working together on projects that are really focused on what we call bus stop communications. And what this means is that we are meeting people where they are and working to take them where we want them to be. And this theory of communications acknowledges that to make progress, to move people, we have to be willing to have hard conversations, to go where people are and share really powerful stories, insights, and other critical tools to persuade. Similarly, earlier this year, Representative Sarah McBride, the first openly trans member of our US Congress, gave a really powerful interview calling out the urgent need to focus on what she called the art of persuasion or of change making for trans people and for our broader movement. So she noted that without telling stories or having these difficult conversations that can change minds, well-funded and coordinated misinformation and disinformation about our community can take hold and feed on that lack of understanding. And that storytelling really allows us to build support for our community on solid ground instead of what she called a house built on sand. At NCLR, we know that it is our imperative in this moment to navigate an increasingly siloed and diffuse earned and social media landscape in which there is a real danger that we are speaking mostly only to people who agree with us and are exposed to content that reinforces just our own worldview. So, for example, in June, just a few months ago, Axios reported that when people were asked their main source of news over the past month, most cited social media, podcasts, and YouTube as their primary source. 14% said ABC, CBS, or NBC. 10% said Fox News, 6% said CNN or MSNBC, and 3% said very conservative media like Breitbart or Newsmax. NCLR is a really small organization, but we're able to punch above our weight class by leveraging this size to be nimble, as Shannon mentioned earlier, to move really quickly in this rapidly changing digital information landscape. We can experiment, we can fail fast, and we can identify which new strategies we need to break through. So, for example, recently I asked a disinformation expert what he thought the single greatest changes that we should make in our thinking as an LGBTQ community. And he said that facts and data are really being dwarfed by massive amounts of misinformation and disinformation content. We have to move more quickly. We have to be willing to throw more spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Our opponents are putting out massive amounts of content, and we really need to increase our share of voice in that conversation. I'm really grateful to work with an organization like NCLR where we can create communication strategies that help people understand why we are fighting for our rights in court and change hearts and minds in the court of public opinion. And I think part of what makes communications at NCLR so unique is the opportunity to really pair these innovative communication strategies with expert legal strategies to extend our impact. So in Childs v. Salazar, for example, this is the Supreme Court conversion therapy case that Shannon mentioned earlier. We worked together to create a public education and communication strategy with this in mind. So we wanted to so effectively reach conservative religious parents that regardless of how the Supreme Court rules in this case, we would have dissuaded these vulnerable parents from seeking to place their kids in conversion therapy in the first place. And to do that, we have really tried to resist falling into this frame that our opposition has repeatedly sought to create, which is one that pits the LGBTQ community against religion. We know that more than 60% of kids whose parents force them into conversion therapy attempt suicide. So we are working with conservative parents whose children either survived or died by suicide following conversion therapy efforts. And together with conservative parents who can speak to the harm of conversion therapy on their children and families, we're working to meet parents where they are and to help connect them to information, resources, and support. We're using digital-led strategies as the most effective tool that we have to reach people right now, just like that research in Axios shows us. And we're leveraging research that helps us understand the journey that people take from a digital perspective. So for parents, where do they go to look for help when they find out their child is coming out, is LGBTQ? What kinds of resources do those parents need? How can we disrupt their connection to disinformation and instead connect them to the facts? So this campaign that we've been working on for only a few months has already reached more than 1.7 million people. And we're going to work to continue to scale up these efforts in the lead up to June and when the Supreme Court makes their eventual decision so that we can reach as many parents as possible and protect as many LGBTQ kids as we can. And with that, I will turn it back to our fearless leader, Amani. She's going to facilitate some Q&A for us.
Oh, thank you so much, Lauren. And thank you to the NCLR team for this incredible update, for the life-changing and life-saving work that you're doing during one of the most tumultuous times in our history. NCLR's work is thoughtful and pragmatic, and we are able to move the needle. We're not just saying the right thing, we're doing the right thing. And we're making the kind of change that's helping people right now. That said, we have a few minutes left. Are there any, I'm going to look in the Q&A now. Are there any questions that folks have? I don't see any yet. I'll give you just a little bit of time. This is a great question. What are some small ways we can support or raise NCLR's voice and reach? Social media helpful. Lauren, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. That's a question that I love. I'm very excited to see some community interest in raising our share of voice. That's fantastic. So we are doing strategies, like I mentioned in Childs, where we're very specifically targeting conservative religious parents, but also on our social media channels, I would just say, I would encourage you to please follow us. Please share our content. Please look to see some of our case updates there. A lot of the work that we're doing right now on digital, on our digital channels, and we will kind of increase in the future, will be working to really explain the issues at hand. This is really important content to be sharing with people who, to Amani's point about how rapidly things are changing, are just struggling to get a grasp of what's happening. And I know Shannon had mentioned earlier as well that some of what this administration has really tried to do is just go after so many things in a sort of a whack-a-mole approach that it's impossible for us to respond. So as much as we can get out there the information about what's happening, about what people can do, connecting people to important presentations about their rights and how to counter things. I know, for example, Ming has done some really great work on helping people understand their immigration rights in this moment. These are the kinds of things on social that are really critical, and encourage your friends as well. And they may see this on social when you're sharing some of these things. Encourage them as well to share and connect with us to help do some of that work. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you. Any other questions before we sign off? Right, that's a great question. What's happening to the Hogar program now that asylum seekers are blocked? We are putting some thought into that right now, but I mean, we talked about this a little bit. Would you want to, obviously this is new, but you want to talk through how we're thinking through this? Great question. Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's a real time of uncertainty for our asylum clients. The fact that their claims are being frozen. So the claims are being frozen; they're not being denied. So we're continuing to prepare our clients' cases, in hopes that this freeze will be lifted, or if it goes on, that exploring being part of a legal challenge. To that, obviously the government has a duty under both the laws passed by Congress, and those laws were passed to effectuate a treaty that the U.S. is part of. And so there is an obligation to process these asylum claims. We're continuing to prepare our clients and advise them on what they can do in the meantime to protect themselves. I mean, the good news is these are not denials, so we don't want to alarm, anybody whose asylum case is pending. But it is causing a lot of uncertainty and stress.
Thank you so much, Ming. Let's see, we have a question. Thank you so much for all your work. I'm wondering if there are examples of things that haven't worked and what you have learned from that. Shannon, I was hoping you might take this one.
Yeah, well, let's see. I will honestly say that I feel like everything that we have tried so far has been effective, some more so than others. One thing that we've had to navigate, I kind of alluded to this a little bit, is just the Supreme Court right now, the composition of the court, and the fact that every time we or any of the other LGBTQ legal groups, or honestly any progressive legal group in the country, secures an initial victory, which we have secured a lot of those collectively, a lot of the abusive policies of this administration that have targeted different vulnerable communities, including our community, very much so. We've gotten a lot of federal district courts, including federal district judges appointed by Trump himself. These judges have been from across the political spectrum, have stepped in and issued injunctions to stop these policies from going into effect. And then what we have seen happening, and this is at this point such a stark pattern, the Supreme Court intervenes. The administration asks the Supreme Court to issue an emergency stay, stopping the injunction from going into effect. And the court is, like in the vast majority of cases, just issuing these stays and allowing these terrible policies to go into effect. So we've had to navigate that reality. So that's been something we've had to adjust to. And I'll just quickly say, not to go on too long about this, we got a very negative decision in the Scrimeti case, challenging Tennessee's ban on medical care for transgender young people. And without going into a lot of deadly detail, that decision did shut down certain legal arguments that we had been relying on very heavily to challenge policies targeting transgender people. And so we have adjusted to that. And now we have brought cases that do not rely on equal protection theories that are now much more difficult to make after Scrimeti. So we did not miss a beat on that. We jumped right in. We challenged the TRICARE exclusion. We're not on equal protection grounds, but on statutory grounds. And we, as Monty alluded to, we brought a new lawsuit. The administration cruelly first granted retirement benefits to transgender service members who qualified based on the number of years they had served. I say granted, they're entitled to them. They earned them. They deserve them. They were issued orders giving them these benefits, and then abruptly that was yanked away from them. We've challenged that, and we came up with legal arguments that do not rely on the arguments the Supreme Court rejected in Scrimeti. So I would say that just the theme here is we've had to be very, flexible, very flexible, and just very adaptive and coming up with we are, anytime there's a bad development, there's always something we can do. With every move that this administration makes or the conservative Supreme Court makes, there is always a counter move. There's always something we can do. And that is our mindset. We're not going to just be stopped in our tracks. We're always going to look for a way around.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Something else that I was going to mention, and Lauren, actually, maybe it might help for you to come in and share as well. But thinking about our messaging and how we talk about things, some of the things that we've learned is there are some things that have changed over time. There was a time not too long ago where we would talk about gender affirming care, and that was the term that we used, and that was to be more inclusive. But what we find in the moment that we're in now is that a lot of times our opponents are using that as, saying, oh, what does that even mean? I don't like, and if we just take that out and just talk about healthcare like we would talk about anything else, that's a way to make this a little bit easier to talk about. We also know that we have, in the past, we've started with talking about suicidality, but we know that when we want to move the needle, we actually don't have to, we don't start with that. There's a lot of other ways that we can talk. The opposite is true as well. It's not just that young people don't do well when they don't have support. It's that young people do really well when they have support of parents and people that care about them. And by just flipping that, we end up having more people with us. And, a lot of times when we were talking about trans kids in particular, there were trans kids that were often on their own. And that ended up reinforcing some of the messages that trans kids were left alone. And that wasn't something we wanted to reinforce. So when we have pictures of folks like having kids with their families, having kids with their friends, those are all things too that we learn. And I think that's a really good question because there are some things that, the work that we're doing now is really working really well. And there's things that were working, 10 years ago that don't work the same way that right now. So I just wanted to add that. Lauren, do you have anything else that around messaging?
Yeah, I just want to say I completely agree with that, Amani. And from a messaging perspective, we are in a constant state of experimentation because of exactly what we're talking about, which is that this landscape is evolving so rapidly. So some of what we're doing now, for example, with regard to spokespeople and messages, is analyzing the digital landscape. If there is, for example, a news outlet that interviews one of our spokespeople, and then that interview is shared to social, we're going in and analyzing backlash across social media platforms in response to that messaging to see what that feedback is and how we can integrate it. And a lot of what we're learning is that sometimes our instincts are wrong about what we think is really compelling, about messages that will, really garner a lot of empathy from people. And it's really important in that moment that we keep adjusting and changing and figuring out how we can more clearly resonate with folks.
Oh, thank you so much, Lauren. Nancy, great question. What family law work are we doing right now? Shannon, you're coming off. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'll hop in on that. We are doing a lot of family law work. We try to monitor what's happening in litigation across the country and jump in and help private family law attorneys to when there's a need to litigate a case involving the rights of LGBTQ people or adults or children. I would say the main three categories of cases that we're seeing right now are cases that involve whether states are going to fully respect the Obergefell decision about marriage equality and treat married same-sex couples exactly the same way that they treat married different-sex couples. There's a very important case pending in Oklahoma that we jumped in and represent and took on representation and briefing, which is just about whether Oklahoma is going to recognize that when a married same-sex couple has a child together, both of them are presumed to be the child's legal parents. The lower court said no, that they weren't going to apply Obergefell to that situation, which was very concerning. So that's the decision. The Oklahoma Supreme Court has been sitting on that case a long time. Sooner or later, they will be issuing a decision. I certainly hope that one comes out the right way. Anyway, the other two categories of cases that are most active right now are this issue that has been around forever, which is under what circumstances Are courts going to recognize that someone who has functioned in every way as a child's parent, but doesn't have a biological connection to the child and is not legally married to the child's other parent, what protections will state law recognize in a situation like that? And there's a lot of litigation in Mississippi recently addressing that, for example, where we've been really actively involved. We've got a very good decision recently from the Mississippi Supreme Court on that, which was very welcome. And then the last category is there's a lot of questions now about surrogacy. You all keep anybody who's interested in family law, keep your eye on that. I mean, we're seeing states grappling with how to apply their surrogacy laws to same-sex couples. And I will just warn everybody, we're also seeing sort of an emerging movement from the right, from conservative quarters to restrict surrogacy, and that's troubling. I'll just say that NCLR's position on surrogacy is that we strongly support the availability of surrogacy as a way to build families, and also at the same time, we strongly support protecting the people who act as surrogates with all kinds of ensuring that their health needs are met, that they retain complete discretion over whether to continue with the pregnancy, that they are represented by counsel. So we think both of those things are important. And that's something that we've done a tremendous amount of work on in the past, I would say, particularly in the past 2 to 3 years.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And actually, Shannon, why don't you stay on? I think this is probably one for you. I totally understand wanting to play the cards close to the chest, but not wanting to share too much. But I would love to hear broad strokes of your plan, legislative response if child does not go our way.
Oh, yeah.
And you might want to talk about public education in as much as you can and how you're thinking through that. Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah, no, I can share what we're thinking around a legislative approach. The idea is to, if we need to, if the court strikes down the existing laws, which I still hold out some hope they won't, but if they do, uh, the approach we've come up with would make it a lot easier for individuals who have been harmed by conversion therapy to bring damages claims against conversion therapists. And it would do that in two primary ways. One is by extending the statute of limitations so that people have a longer time period in which they can bring such a claim. That's something that has been done with sexual assault claims in a lot of states, recognizing, and the reason that states have done that for sexual assault claims, those reasons apply here too. They're recognizing it's such a serious harm. So you want to give people more time to bring a case to get some recompense for that, and that people are traumatized by the harm and are often just shut down and unable to take actions immediately to protect themselves. So you want to, it addresses that too. And those are both very real things. We just need to give people more time to be able to bring these lawsuits. And then the other thing this new approach would do is create a rebuttable presumption of harm. So this would really be a big help to people suing these therapists. The law would just provide that if you're alleging or claiming that you've been subjected to conversion therapy, then the court is going to presume that you were harmed. And it puts the burden on the therapist to prove that you were not harmed. So that would be a very significant change in the law and a very big help to people bringing these cases. So I feel pretty good, that we'll be able to get some legislation in place that will be a very significant deterrent to conversion therapy.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And we are at our time right now, so I want to thank our incredible panel for your amazing discussion today. I want to thank you all for joining us. As many of you know, and how we've said this, we're a lean organization and we depend on donations for this work. This time of year, NCLR brings in a third of our donations through individuals. And so we have many NCLR supporters in this room. So thank you so much for your support of this organization. We couldn't do this work without you. For those of you that haven't, if you haven't made a gift to NCLR, please consider doing so now. If you learned something new, or if we frame things in a way that made you understand something better, or if you just like the way that we do work and our approach, please consider donating. Like Shannon and Lauren mentioned, we are small and we are nimble and we punch above our weight class. We don't have a lot of overhead, so the dollars that you give go right back into protecting our community, and I can promise you that we will make you proud. So you can find out more about NCLR at nclrights.org. There is a QR code that you can follow to make a donation and find out more about us. And you can also follow us on all the social media channels. Thank you so much, everyone. We really, really appreciate your partnership. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.